hello, how are you? Hello. Have to cough my lungs out. I have to go. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4. Discrimination protests in Australia. Government news.
Victorian government condemns far-right attack on camp sovereignty after anti-immigration rally, ABC News. Counter-terrorism police will help investigate an attack on a First Nations protest camp in Melbourne by far-right demonstrators after Sunday's anti-immigration rally in the city, Victoria's police minister says. Victoria Police said a group of people assaulted various members of a second group using sticks and flagpoles during the incident, which took place around 5 p.m. on Sunday. Video shared with the ABC shows a group of men wearing black attacking people at Camp Sovereignty at King's Domain. The men also verbally abused members of the group occupying Camp Sovereignty and could be seen stomping on an Aboriginal flag. Neo-Nazi figure Thomas Sewell can be seen in the footage. The state's police minister, Anthony Carbines, told reporters he met with Chief Commissioner Mike Bush about the incident on Monday. Police, both through counter-terrorism and their criminal investigation unit, are investigating those matters to see what NSN, National Socialist Network, involvement there was, and other matters, Mr. Carbines said. Victoria Police urged anyone involved or anyone who may have footage of the incident to come forward. Camp Sovereignty organisers said 4 people were injured in the incident. Ambulance Victoria said a woman aged in her 30s was taken to hospital with upper body injuries. Robbie Thorpe, an Indigenous activist and a founder of the camp, said one woman who suffered pretty serious head injuries was discharged from hospital earlier today. He believed the attack was premeditated and said the members of the other group were carrying weapons. Mr. Thorpe also questioned the police response at the time, asking why officers didn't monitor the group as they left the rally. There's some serious questions, not just for them but for the wider community in this country, he said. He said many of those seriously assaulted were women, and alleged some belongings were also stolen. Natalie Farah said she was at Camp Sovereignty as a supporter yesterday, when a group of young men approached, chanting, then ran up the hill towards them. They were holding flagpoles, they were holding metal poles, some bits and pieces and rocks and things like that they found on their way here, she said. She said she was kicked in the stomach, and others were tackled, kicked and punched. Ms. Farah described the men as neo-Nazis and said members of the group had already visited the camp twice that day. So their return following the march was predictable. Victoria Police said the group's earlier attendance at Camp Sovereignty before the protests would form part of its investigation. Anthony Carbines described the incident as disgraceful. Nobody's going to stand for that. People went there with an intent to cause trouble, police dealt with them and will continue to call that out, he said. Police will be investigating those matters and will also be in contact with members of Camp Sovereignty as well as other First Nations people who are deeply upset and distressed with that activity yesterday. This is what happens when you have bullies in the community who roam in packs to intimidate others. It's gutless and it needs to be called out. A statement provided by Camp Sovereignty quoted an unnamed witness who said she was attacked at the site. I had what looked like a 15-year-old boy rip my hair, throw me to the ground and smash into my face with his fists. He did it with a smile on his face. I couldn't believe it, the witness is quoted as saying. Camp organizers said police arrived at the site after the men had left and made no arrests. Victoria Police confirmed nobody was arrested at the site but said the investigation was ongoing. 12 arrested during Sunday's rallies. Victoria Police said 12 arrests were made during Sunday's anti-immigration rally and counter-protest in Melbourne CBD. But none of those arrests were in relation to the Camp Sovereignty incident. 7 people are expected to be charged with assaulting police, resisting police, attempting robbery and failure to follow police direction. 5 people were issued with infringement notices for behaving in a riotous manner, while 6 others were removed from the area to prevent criminal offending. Police said. Scuffles broke out as attendees of the March for Australia clashed with attendees of a pro-Palestinian rally. Speaking on Monday, Chief Commissioner Mike Bush said he was proud of the way police conducted themselves during the rallies, but did not go into detail on the behaviour of protesters. Our staff were not treated well, especially with the backdrop of what they have been through in the last 7 days, he said. Victoria Police officers act with absolute professionalism and they deserve to be treated with respect. Victoria Police said about 5,000 people attended the rallies and officers, including mounted police, formed lines to separate the groups at various points. Officers used OC spray and baton rounds against some rally attendees. Victoria Police said 2 officers were injured after being struck by bottles thrown at them, but did not require hospitalisation. There is absolutely no place for any of this violent and disruptive behaviour in Victoria, and the priority for police was to separate opposing groups and prevent breaches of the peace, a Victoria Police spokesperson said. Those arrested face charges which include assault police, behave in a riotous manner, attempted robbery, assault, and resist police. Police will also review CCTV vision from the rally with a view to identifying and investigating further offences. Deputy Premier Ben Carroll praised the work of Victoria Police and said police will review vision of Sunday's events as part of their investigation. In relation to the police's activities yesterday, from what I could see and tell, they did an excellent job, he said. I witnessed a lady being thrown to the ground. I witnessed other people with blood all over their faces. I witnessed someone just trying to calm the situation then set upon. So there is lots of footage and I hope those perpetrators are brought to account.
What are you doing?
Labor faces Senate showdown over home supports for older Australians, ABC News. Labor is facing its first Senate showdown of the new term, with an unlikely political alliance pushing to expedite the delivery of home supports for older Australians languishing on a wait list. The coalition, Greens and Independent Senator David Pocock have teamed up to pressure the government to bring forward 20,000 home support packages. Labor faces Senate showdown over home supports for older Australians, ABC News. Labor is facing its first Senate showdown of the new term, with an unlikely political alliance pushing to expedite the delivery of home supports for older Australians languishing on a wait list. The coalition, Greens and Independent Senator David Pocock have teamed up to pressure the government to bring forward 20,000 home support packages. Following the government's promised release of 83,000 being pushed back from July to November. More than 121,000 older Australians are waiting to be assessed for assistance to help them live at home, the Federal Health Department revealed on Friday. on top of at least 87,000 who have been approved but are waiting for a package or a high level of support. The government needs to pass its bill to tweak existing legislation to bring it in line with the aged care reforms before they are rolled out later this year. But the Alliance has seized on it to bring amendments that would require additional packages to be released immediately. An amendment set to be moved by Shadow Aged Care Minister Anne Ruston demands 20,000 packages be released now and a total of 40,000 made available before the end of the year. If the changes clear the Senate, the bill will need to return to the House of Representatives, potentially delaying its passage. Debate began in the Senate on Monday evening and is expected to continue on Tuesday. Senator Ruston on Monday said the coalition would not stand in the way of the legislation, but urged Labor to bring forward the planned release of home care packages. Anthony Albanese and his government have abandoned older Australians who need support to stay independent, living in their own homes, she said. Many vulnerable older Australians are waiting more than a year to access care they've been assessed as needing. This is nothing short of a national crisis. The department is ready, the sector is ready, but the government continues to withhold critical aged care packages without any reasonable excuse. Aged Care Minister Sam Ray has not indicated whether the government will move to speed up the home care rollout, but has repeatedly said more packages will be available from November 1st. Labor defends rollout plan. The issue dominated question time on Monday, with coalition and independent MPs all hammering the minister. It prompted Mr. Ray to vow that anyone who was assessed as high priority would get support within a month, once the November rollout date arrived. We acknowledge that wait times for aged care assessments are longer than we would like and we are working to address this, he said. Mr. Ray, who was bumped to the front bench in this year's reshuffle, added that more than 2,000
How we get a package were currently being allocated each week. Independent official last week confirmed they are not new package and instead one of made available through the older people either doing fuck you, get fucked. Get an answer. You at all.
2,000 home care packages were currently being allocated each week. But department officials last week confirmed they were not new packages and instead ones made available through older people either dying or moving into residential care. They also said that no additional packages had been made available since the end of last financial year. Senator Penny Allman-Payne, the Greens spokesperson for older people, wrote to Health Minister Mark Butler on Monday, warning that the delay in rolling out the Support at Home program had meant families had been forced to admit their loved ones to hospital. It is clear that the government's refusal to release more home care packages is rippling across our healthcare system. In particular the availability of hospital beds, she said. The government has previously argued it was necessary to delay the implementation of the sweeping Aged Care Act changes by a few months, from July to November, in order to allow the sector time to prepare. Aged care advocates and providers have welcomed the extension, but argue the promised release of new home care packages, which provide assistance for things like cooking, cleaning or showering, should not have been held up along with the rest of the changes. Yes, you delayed the act but you can't delay the packages. We need more now, said Tom Simonston, Chief Executive of Aging Australia. We could deal with 20,000 new packages really quite easily as a sector. The broader reforms address recommendations of the Royal Commission into the aged care industry, but the rushed timeframe to implement them drew criticism from the sector. Mr. Ray on Monday said the overwhelming response from elderly Australians and providers was that they needed a brief deferral of the implementation of the new Aged Care Act to ensure that the implementation would be smooth and would meet the needs of older Australians. This is a system-wide reform that changes the way that care is delivered, he said. We're spending each and every day until November 1st making sure that this system works for older people. Mr. Butler told ABC Radio National the bill was about a new system, not just about the release of new packages, and that the delay to November was relatively short given the size of the change. I want to get to the 1st of November and get those new packages into the system, he said. We've waited too long for a 21st century system of aged care that I'm confident is going to meet the needs of older Australians into the future.
SBS live streams and podcasts are supported by advertising. Love a great night's sleep? Who doesn't? Harvey Norman is bringing you the ultimate sleep event with September. Buy a Tempur Breeze, Lux Breeze or Pro Lux Adapt this September from Harvey Norman and you'll get a bonus Tempur Manchester pack valued at up to $699, plus bonus standard local delivery on selected in-store mattress purchases over $999. Discover the unmatched comfort and quality of a Tempur for restful and restorative sleep that's better, longer and...
See at the US Open. With the latest SBS News, I'm Deborah Broad. The Victorian Government's anti-hate task force is to examine the weekend's anti-immigration marches and the ensuing violence in Melbourne. The announcement was made before Premier Jacinta Allen's press conference was interrupted by heckling from self-proclaimed neo-Nazi Thomas Sewell in a Melbourne park.
Over the course of this week, alongside Victoria Police, I will be convening the anti-hate task force to both look at the incidences over the weekend, but also understand too that this goes beyond just being a law and order issue. There is something deeper going on here.
The Premier has released a statement saying she is unfazed by the heckling conducted by people she's described as goons who are intent on whipping up fear to divide society. She says if Nazis oppose her government's agenda, she wears that like a badge of honour. Meanwhile, experts say that the anti-immigration rallies attended by thousands of Australians are opportunities for neo-Nazi groups to enlist more members. While only a small contingent of those who showed up identified as white nationalists, ANU terrorism expert Levi West has said there was an overlap that extremists could exploit. Coalition backbencher Matt Canavan has blamed the government's immigration policies for driving people towards extremist views.
Ultimately, the government has to take responsibility here for not showing the leadership for the Australian people so that they don't get attracted to these kind of rallies and end up giving airtime to these type of extremists.
But Minister for Multiculturalism Anne Ali has said that's not true. She's told SBS Arabic that while the demonstrations may have been the result of fear, those people do not represent Australia.
We call them out as racism because that is what they are. And we do not accept that this belongs in Australia. And we stand with all migrants. Doesn't matter where they're from. We stand with all migrants to Australia.
A new report has found that racism in healthcare is costing lives, with patients repeatedly denied care, misdiagnosed or treated with suspicion because of who they are. The scoping review published by the Australian Human Rights Commission looked at evidence from 100 studies, concluding that systemic and interpersonal racism is a critical driver of poor health, chronic illness and premature death. Race Discrimination Commissioner Giridharan Sivaraman says the report confirms what communities have been saying for decades. He's called the findings a wake-up call for the nation. Australians seeking information from the Commonwealth could soon be slugged with a fee under reforms being considered by the government. There are currently no processing fees for Commonwealth Freedom of Information requests, but Attorney-General Michelle Rowland wants to introduce them, saying the system is being overrun with vexatious applications. But the Coalition has chastised the push to introduce a fee. Attorney-General spokesman Julian Lisa has branded it a pay-to-play transparency tax that will make it harder to access documents.
This is a government that talked a big game on transparency before they came to office, but what they've done since coming to office is anything but transparency. Information that the government holds on individuals is the right of individuals to seek that information, and being able to get that information about government decisions is important because government is conducted for the Australian people in the name of the Australian people.
Spain's president is proposing a plan to combat natural disasters following heatwaves and wildfires fueled by climate change. The country has just endured a catastrophic fire season with 16 regions declared disaster zones and the EU called in to support firefighting efforts. Now, President Sanchez says Spain must be ready for the next bout of extreme weather.
We propose to the administrations that all of us, every single one of us, increase and keep for the 365 days of the year all of the human and technical resources needed to prevent and to fight extreme climate events. What does this mean? To rely on firefighters and brigades that are robust, trained, endowed with the appropriate vehicles and technologies to support long-term public policies.
French police have found stolen jewellery worth millions of dollars tucked inside some underpants at a Paris train station. The newspaper La Parisien says the discovery was made during a routine check at the Gare de Lyon long-distance station. The Paris prosecutor's office says officers discovered one of the men they stopped had concealed a sock in his underwear containing a luxury watch and numerous pieces of jewellery. The haul included a necklace valued at an estimated 5 million euros, earrings worth over 2 million, and a ring worth 1 million euros. To sport, and a Polish man has apologised after stealing a player's tennis cap from a young fan at the US Open in New York. The man snatched the hat after it was offered to the boy moments after a singles match, with the entire moment caught on camera and the footage now seen by millions online. The man has since posted on social media that he became caught up in the heat of the moment and it was never his intention to steal away a prized memento from the young fan. He says he's now returned the hat to the boy. I'm Deborah Groark. This is SBS News.
SBS Audio is supported by advertising. Love a great night's sleep? Who doesn't? Harvey Norman is bringing you the ultimate sleep event with...
In this bulletin, police investigating a far-right attack on an Indigenous camp in Melbourne. Almost a dozen UN employees missing after a militant raid in Yemen. And in sport, the Socceroos preparing to meet New Zealand later this week. With the latest SBS News, I'm Deborah Groark. Police are investigating an attack by far-right demonstrators on an Aboriginal protest camp in Melbourne. Victoria Police say no arrests were made on the day, but inquiries are ongoing following the incident at Camp Sovereignty, which took place after an anti-immigration rally. The marches that took place around Australia have been labelled a neo-Nazi con job by a range of leaders, with opposition immigration spokesman Paul Scar saying he believes it's important for fringe elements to not get a foothold in the legitimate immigration debate. State premiers like South Australia's Peter Malinauskas have said the rallies were driven by a vocal minority and did not reflect the state's values.
97.6% of South Australians have an immigrant heritage. I'm proud of mine, and I think most South Australians are proud of theirs. And the people who are protesting today are naive to this state and this nation's own history.
There are fears hundreds of people may have been killed after a magnitude 6.0 earthquake shook eastern Afghanistan near the Pakistan border. Initial reports put the death toll at 9, but the country's health ministry says accurate figures are yet to be gathered in an area of scattered hamlets with a long history of earthquakes and flooding. Nevertheless, the Taliban-run Bakhtar state news agency is reporting at least 250 people have died in the earthquake and that rescuers are combing the rubble of homes in a desperate hunt for survivors. The Yemen and Houthi militants have seized employees of 2 UN aid organisations after raiding their offices in the nation's capital of Sana'a. It's believed 11 employees from the World Food Programme and the United Nations Children's Fund have been detained. The motives behind the incident remain unclear, but militants have previously accused UN employees of spying for the United States. An independent trial of more than 60 age verification tools has found some of the technology could successfully prevent young people from accessing inappropriate content. The trial had been launched after the government announced a social media ban for people under 16, which will come into effect in December. The ban had prompted some to express concern over potential privacy breaches, but members of the Age Check certification scheme have found the systems that included estimating someone's age based on physical features and hand movements were generally secure and could handle prickly issues, including AI-generated spoofing and forgeries. Federal Communications Minister Annika Wells says she's more convinced than ever that what they're asking for with age verification is more than fair.
It's a fascinating space. This is emerging technology. It's moving very quickly. But these are some of the world's richest companies. They are at the forefront of AI. They use the data that we give them for a bevy of commercial purposes. I think it is reasonable to ask them to use that same data and tech to keep kids safe online.
Tibetans in Australia have accused China of repeatedly intimidating and repressing community members in Australia. 26-year-old Yang Kie Sangpo has told a group gathered for Tibet Lobby Day at Parliament House in Canberra that the diaspora is constantly intimidated and threatened by the Chinese Communist Party. Shenpen Ringpo Pontsang has a similar story, saying Tibetans travelling back to see family on holiday are threatened by Chinese officials for acts as basic as selling traditional food at community events.
These are very obvious and overt attempts to curtail our freedoms here in Australia, despite being so far away and far removed and we thought safety away from the Chinese Communist Party.
A Chinese woman accused of spying in Australia has pleaded not guilty to the charge of reckless foreign interference. The woman has entered the plea during her appearance today in the ACT Magistrates Court, where she's also won a bid to have her name suppressed. Police allege the Australian permanent resident covertly collected information about a Canberra Buddhist Association for China. To sport and in football news, Socceroos midfielder Aidan Hurustich says it's going to be his job to teach his younger teammates what it means to play for Australia. Hurustich has played 31 games at the national level, which makes him the third most experienced player in the 25-man squad named for Australia's 2 upcoming games against New Zealand, the first of which is on Friday. 7 of the 25 have never played for the Socceroos before, but Hurustich says he's confident the new players will be fast learners.
The first thing is they have to know what it means to wear the green and gold, how important it is for the country, for the nation, and what it means. But I'm sure they're going to pick it up very quick.
I'm Deborah Rourke. This is SBS News.
Okay.
People at a First Nations protest camp were attacked by far-right demonstrators after the anti-immigration rally in Melbourne. Here's what we know. This video was shared with the ABC. It shows a group of men attacking people at Camp Sovereignty, an Indigenous Australian demonstration and occupation in Melbourne. The men verbally abused members of the group occupying Camp Sovereignty and were seen stomping on an Aboriginal flag. Some politicians have been quick to try separate the anti-immigration rally from neo-Nazis in attendance. A key speaker at the Melbourne rally was neo-Nazi figure Thomas Sewell, who has previously faced court on multiple charges, including allegedly leading a white supremacist rally in 2023. He was among the group of men in a scuffle with Camp Sovereignty supporters. Victoria Police said officers were told a group formed a line before assaulting various members with sticks and flagpoles. Camp Sovereignty organisers said the attack happened about 5 p.m. and was unprovoked, and those who were attacked were predominantly women at a peace camp. Victoria's police minister said the incident was disgraceful, and Camp Sovereignty organisers said 4 people were injured. Ambulance Victoria said a woman in her 30s was taken to hospital with upper body injuries. No arrests or charges have been made, but Victoria Police said the investigation is ongoing. Opposition leader Susan Lee and Liberal frontbencher Jacinta Price have said the protest was hijacked. Green Senator Maureen Faruqi said these protests should be a wake-up call to take far-right extremism seriously. People at a First Nations protest camp.
Unfortunately, over the last 8 years, I have noticed Islamophobia on the rise. Both my children were walking home from school, and they both had their uniforms on, one in primary and one in high school. They're still children. Several times they had experienced people driving by, adults, not young people, rolling down their windows and yelling out profanity at my children. But after it had happened a couple of times, my son told me. And I asked my daughter, why did you not share that with me? And she told me, I thought when I put the hijab on, it just comes with the territory. So I didn't see why I should make a fuss. That broke my heart. These incidents affect our children. They affect the young specifically because it gets them questioning their identity. Can I not be both Australian and Muslim? It is imperative for all Muslims to report these incidents, no matter how minor you may think it be. So it is very important for all Muslims, whether they're a female who's experienced something because of her hijab, a male who may have experienced something at work, or a child who may have experienced something. It is very important to report these incidents. Empirical data is necessary. This right.
Do you agree with
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is powerful. Within the country, it's near untouchable. Australia's step to list it as a terror organisation, historic.
It is unacceptable for a foreign regime to orchestrate or engage in violent acts on Australian soil. We wanted to send a clear message.
Bolstered with an estimated 150,000 troops, the IRGC is separate to the state army, established after the 1979 revolution, and answers directly to the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
They actually have this slightly different objective, which is specifically to protect the regime, which is essentially a theocratic regime in Iran, and to further the regime's interests.
One of its several branches includes the Quds Force, which coordinates its allies in the Middle East, like Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas, all non-state actors, which Australia has already prescribed as terror groups.
It's much more complicated when you want to designate an organisation as a terrorist entity and they're actually interconnected with a state apparatus.
The IRGC also commands the notorious volunteer-based Basij militia, known to brutally crack down on anti-government demonstrations, most recently in 2022, where many Iranians protested the regime following the death of 22-year-old Kurdish woman Mahsa Amini, killed at the hands of the morality police after not wearing her headscarf properly in public. Australia now joins Canada and the US in listing it as a terror group. It could now also influence New Zealand, the EU and UK in following suit. But the opposition demanded the government do this 2 years ago in a Senate committee report following Mahsa Amini's death.
Bring on the legislation to list this organisation today.
But the government says it's not so simple.
Because it is an arm of the state, the advice that we receive is that it will need special legislation, unlike other terror groups which have been listed, which are not part of a state.
Within a day of receiving ASIO advice, the government now acting and working to amend the laws to make it possible. Rayanne Tamer, SBS World News.
We build houses for young professionals with no.
Potentially, the Labor government has a solution to the housing crisis, at least according to one Indian government minister. It's been revealed, I guess, that they're apparently in deep negotiations to bring over hundreds of thousands of Indian migrants to build up to 1 million houses here in Australia. This is the Indian minister talking about it.
Just do the math on 1 million homes, and you'll realize the mind-boggling opportunity. You could have hundreds of thousands of Indian labor go to Australia, lakhs of people who can go there, help to construct good quality modern buildings.
So, high immigration has caused the housing crisis, which has led to a shortage of homes. Now, the government's idea is to bring in more migrants to build houses for the migrants that they already brought in. And apparently, they're going to go to the UAE to try and finance the project. What kind of logic is going on here? Why don't they just try cutting immigration? Put a freeze on migration. That'll solve your housing crisis pretty quickly.
Yeah, so that's India's Commerce Minister talking about sending, as you said, hundreds of thousands of Indians here. That comes right after a Redbridge poll that we talked about on this program that found 85% of first-generation Indians in this country voted Labor at the last election. So you put those two things together, we need a lot of homes, bring a whole lot of Indians to Australia.
I wrote my own name on my hand because I didn't trust myself to remember it by the end of the day. I had forgotten.
Good evening. 3 protests, 1 marathon, and the thin blue line stretched to the limit. Hundreds of police have managed to maintain relative order during rallies through the heart of Sydney, one led by members of a neo-Nazi organisation. But it was a tale of two cities. In Melbourne, there was brawling in the streets, ugly clashes and arrests.
At least it started as planned. Thousands at Belmore Park, all united under a forest of Australian flags.
We're not a race.
Good evening. He started the day clashing with the Premier, but tonight he's in custody. Prominent neo-Nazi Thomas Sewell arrested hours after hijacking a high-profile media conference. The spectacle unfolding as the Prime Minister called for calm in Canberra in the wake of the weekend's violent anti-immigration protests.
Victoria's Premier interrupted by Australia's self-appointed problem.
Hey, Jacinda Allen, why don't Australians have the right to protest?
Neo-Nazi leader Thomas Sewell was on his way to court in Melbourne.
Don't put hands on me. Yeah, you don't have the right. I'm at a safe distance.
When he says he saw the Premier.
Shouldn't we have the right to speak in our country, you coward?
The Premier leaving the scene, Mr. Sewell continuing as an offsider, phone in hand, turning this convicted criminal's conduct into content.
They get free press coverage. Nobody else is listening to them, so the only way to get people to listen is to make a scene.
A few hours later, he made a scene again outside of court.
I'm under arrest, but this is what happens in the tyranny of Victoria.
This violent attack on a First Nations camp on Sunday, the catalyst for the cuffs this afternoon.
Hate is driven by fear, and no one in these movements, including myself when I was involved, would ever admit that it's fear.
Jeff Scoop knows about neo-Nazis. He led the movement in America for 20 years and was at the Unite the Right rally in 2017. He has since renounced the beliefs and is in Australia promoting inclusion and harmony.
If you fear you're being replaced, your jobs are being taken away, what does that turn into? That can turn into hate, and hate can lead to violence.
He says the group will look for vulnerabilities in society, like the current concerns over immigration numbers.
Concerns reflected in marches last Sunday.
But ultimately, the government has to take responsibility here for not showing the leadership for the Australian people so that they don't get attracted to these kind of rallies.
But they're filling a vacuum so often that comes from a failure of leadership.
But we're getting those numbers back down to a more ordinary level of immigration. We're a big immigration country.
The Albanese government announcing Australia's permanent migration intake will be 185,000 for this financial year, while the temporary number will be much higher, driven largely by students.
We're still getting that number down. It's started to come down substantially over the last few years since we've been in government, but we recognise that we need to do this to relieve some pressure.
Charles Croucher, 9 News. Tonight, Bob Katter has been referred to the Independent Parliamentary Standards Commission over his threats to Nine reporter Josh Bavis. Greens Senator Sarah Hanson-Young made the referral, calling on the 80-year-old Queensland MP to apologise or resign. Government ministers have also called for an apology, but the Father of the House has refused, saying his only regret is that he wasn't more aggressive, while hinting at legal action of his own.
Charles, thank you. Now to a disturbing development in the crisis gripping our public hospital system. A mother forced to give birth on a couch in the waiting room of one of Sydney's biggest hospitals, Westmead, which could not even provide her with a bed after the delivery. The government has apologised and says it will act. But tonight, the question remains, will that promise be kept?
A picture of joy seconds after a mother welcomed her new baby girl at Westmead. Note, she's not in a hospital bed, but on a couch. On the 31st of July, the woman who asked not to be identified went into labour.
Already in like a second stage of labour, I distinctly remember the midwife yelling, "Bring me the gloves."
Turn back the clock 4 hours. The mother was walking her dog when her water broke and arrived at the hospital at 10:30. The parents were forced to stand in the corridor.
At one point, I felt as if the baby's not moving much, so I've asked to get monitored. So they welcomed us in a waiting room, and there were two couples in the waiting room already monitoring their baby's heartbeat.
And the waiting went on, and still no bed. Only quick-thinking midwives.
She was very quick to come over. She basically, I feel really bad about it, but she kicked out everyone from that waiting room. There was some sort of like a leather couch in that waiting room where they throw the towels on.
And even after she'd given birth, there was still no beds in the maternity ward, so she was transferred to the gynecology ward.
The midwife who was in charge, she directly told me that there are 17 people in this gyno unit and there's only 3 of us, so the ratio is very off.
The mother has chosen to share her story with Nine News, hoping it will never happen again. Do you think it's fair to say it's probably not good enough?
Yeah, I think it's getting to that point where the government really need to interfere and do something better.
In a statement, a midwife at Westmead told Nine News, "Conditions are the worst it's ever been. We need more midwives, but who would want to work for a hospital that doesn't value or listen to them under harsh working conditions with no breaks and being expected to do overtime every single day?"
Well, we're determined to roll out more staff, particularly for Westmead. We're doing more staff across other parts of that hospital.
The closest hospital for the family should have been here at Rouse Hill, but it's still a vacant block. The Minns government was elected on the promise to fix the hospital systems, particularly in the northwest and west. 2 years in, and still no shovels on the ground.
Of course, I would have liked that initial experience to be better for both Mum and Bub, and for that I apologise.
Massilia Eiley, Nine News.
He chased down a woman, grabbed her from behind, forced her into a car and threatened her at knife point, all because she broke up with him. But Ethan Davis won't be going to prison. A judge ruling he will serve his sentence in the community.
He abducted an ex-girlfriend, but Ethan Davis will keep his freedom. Did you think he'd be walking out today? Avoiding prison, instead handed a 3-year intensive correction order for harassing, threatening and kidnapping the woman in 2023. Today, silent, have you paid the price for what you've done? Supported by his mum after previous court clashes.
Do you think it's okay to pass? No, please, no. Stop kidding me.
The couple met working on a super yacht, but she broke it off at Bondi Icebergs, and he unleashed, calling her hundreds of times in a single night, texting, "This is not going to stop, and if I have to break into your house to get you, I will." then dragging her into a car at Roselle, driving to North Head and threatening her with a pocket knife, wearing latex gloves. He told her, "I don't want to leave fingerprints. You have to get rid of the messages."
How could you terrorise a woman like that?
But the judge said this was not protracted domestic violence, but rather they were impulsive acts committed by an immature 22-year-old, finding that a sentence in the community would better address his risk of reoffending and satisfied there is no further risk to the victim. The victim told the court she's suffered significant distress since the attack and has been diagnosed with PTSD. She says she hasn't had a peaceful night's sleep and can't walk to her car at night without being in fear. Davis must be on good behaviour and complete a program teaching respect for women. Annalise Bolt, 9 News.
And if you or anyone you know is a victim of domestic violence, there is help out there. Call 1-800-RESPECT. That's 1-800-737-732. 2 teenagers seen leaving the scene of a stabbing in Maryland yesterday are now in the sights of police. A 16-year-old boy was attacked outside Maryland's train station just after 5, suffering stab wounds to his back and neck.
This act was committed in a public place in a railway station with high-quality CCTV. We have very clear images of the 2 males, and we ask that they hand themselves in, do themselves a favour.
The boy is now in a stable condition and assisting police. 2 arsonists are on the run tonight after setting 2 cars on fire just metres from a home with a sleeping family inside. Residents of the Granville Street awoke to what they say sounded like fireworks, with investigations now underway into why these cars were targeted.
With jerry can in hand, 1, then 2 arsonists appear before the leader places his down to get a better grip. Minutes later, the fire takes hold on Wallace Street, Granville, a ute and a Mazda torched just metres from a home.
Oh my God, the car's on fire! And I was like, what the hell? So I got out, and our whole car was inflamed. Like, it was a smoke to the freaking sky.
An explosive wake-up call at 5:30 this morning.
I was sleeping, and all I hear is this boom.
Very scary. Called 000 straight away.
A family still inside. Neighbours sounded the alarm.
One of them ran outside, and then they came over here, and they were crying.
6 fire trucks and 22 firefighters got to work. Priority 1, stopping the fire from spreading to the home. Neighbours also evacuated. The flames so high, electricity lines were impacted, cutting power to a number of homes.
Car fires have a lot of fuel load in it, and it's not just the fuel, the petrol or the diesel.
The job for these forensic investigators now is not only to look for clues to help identify who those 2 men were, but to also try and find exactly why these cars were set alight so close to that family home. Massilia Eiley, 9 News.
A specialist group of academics has today declared Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. The International Association of Genocide Scholars is chaired by an international law professor at the University of Western Australia. 86% of its 500 members voted in favour of a resolution, finding Israel's policies and actions in Gaza meet the legal definition of genocide. Israel's foreign ministry has rejected the declaration as disgraceful. There is death in every home. They are the desperate words of families searching for loved ones in the wake of a major earthquake in Afghanistan. At least 900 people have been killed, and there are fears for any survivors, with little aid reaching the region.
A desperate search through rubble. Villagers use sticks, shovels, and their bare hands to dig through what were their homes, hoping to see or hear signs of life. I lost 7 children in my family and 3 cousins, this man says. Much of this area in Afghanistan's northeast province of Kunar is still unreachable. Some of those rescued able to walk. Others are carried out on makeshift stretchers. It can be a slow and dangerous process. As the hours pass, the scale of this disaster is sinking in. The death toll rising rapidly, so too the number of the injured. We were under the soil, my wife, son, nephew and grandchildren, this man says. Amazingly, they were saved. Military helicopters are being used to transport some of the wounded. Landing at an army base where locals transfer patients into ambulances. China, one country to respond to calls for international help from the Taliban government, which has been in control since 2021. The death and injury tolls climbing, and the full extent may not be known for days. In London, Edward Godfrey, 9 News.
A landslide has swept away an entire village in Sudan, killing at least 1,000 people. There are reports only one person survived, the disaster coming after days of heavy rainfall in the North African nation. Walter Mikak, who lost his wife and 2 daughters in the 1996 Port Arthur massacre, today met with the Premier to persuade him not to support controversial hunting legislation put forward by the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. The Premier says he will not support any changes that water down gun laws.
Let's introduce something that deals with the problem that this bill supposedly is set up for. Let's deal with the invasive species and feral animals, but let's do it so that it's separated from the whole gun hunting aspect.
Advocates for domestic violence victims have also expressed their concerns. He was the Hungarian-born boxer Australia adopted as their own, but his reputation spanned the globe. Aussie Joe Bugner, who took on the best of the boxing world and Tinseltown too, died today, aged 75.
Joe Bugner went toe-to-toe with the best.
This is a really gallant young man, this 22-year-old Bugner.
2 fights against Ali, the champion, armed with his trademark trash talk.
Round 7, he might go to heaven.
But Bugner went the distance in both.
I still feel confident in winning the title, but this time I couldn't.
There was also a slugfest with another legend, Joe Frazier.
And Bugner applies some pressure.
He may not have won the bouts, but he earned the respect from the greatest of them all.
Will be the next champ as soon as I retire. I know he can do it. I couldn't hurt him. Don't stop, Joe.
It was the 1970s. The Hungarian-born boxer had become a Brit.
It's underway, and over goes Dunn in the first 6 seconds.
With a knockout punch.
This time.
He claimed the British and European titles before hanging up his gloves in 1976. But tough financial times prompted numerous comebacks. And in 1986, he moved down under, and Aussie Joe suddenly became a household name.
Everything about him's tough, so he needs a well-built car.
He had the gift of the jab and the gift of the gab.
He was able to talk the talk, but he also walked the walk.
A regular on television and in film alongside Jean-Claude Van Damme in Street Fighter. Then the news today, which had the boxing world reeling. Joe Bugner had passed away in a Brisbane care home after battling dementia. He was 75.
Very, very sad. He was a beautiful man, a great human, and, an inspiration to all of us.
The fighter who adopted Australia and a country who cheered him on. Damien Ryan, 9 News.
इधर ही 9 News. Whoa, the boxer died.
Thorpe labels alleged camp sovereignty attack a hate crime as it happened. Australian News The Guardian. Key events. Show key events only. Please turn on JavaScript to use this feature. Ray asked about home care package waiting times and elderly death rate. Sam Ray's back, and this time his answer is even shorter than the question is asked. Liberal MP Simon Kenya asks Ray whether research from the National Aging Research Institute that people waiting for longer than 6 months for a home care package had an 18% higher chance of death than those who wait 30 days or less is true. Ray, this time without notes, says he's already canvassed these questions. I refer you to my previous answers. Government pressed on healthcare spending gap between metropolitan and regional areas. What is the government doing about the gap in healthcare spending between metropolitan areas and the regions? Independent MP Rebecca Sharkey asks Mark Butler why the gap in spending has increased from more than $6 billion last year to a more than $8 billion gap now. Butler says the latest bulk billing incentives are higher for regional areas, and that the government has been working on encouraging GPs to live and work in the regions. The tyranny of distance has been one that bedeviled our healthcare system for the entire history of our nation. Technology does help that is providing some relief to Australians living outside our major cities. We are doing all we can to support particularly general practice, making sure that they can really run a thriving, viable business. They're fighting dirty, we're fighting back. Across the planet, progress towards urgent action on climate is being threatened by populist politicians and governments. Fossil fuel influence and corporations emboldened by the political winds to roll back their green pledges. Here in Australia, there is a worrying gap between ambition and action, as media and political interests muddy the waters with increasingly aggressive disinformation. Meanwhile, in the US, a growing lobby of economic and political denial has been empowered by an administration that has declared war on climate progress and wider environmental protections. One powerful way to turn back this tide is by funding strong, independent journalism that stands up for the facts. The Guardian doesn't bow to political pressure, and we don't take advertising from fossil fuel companies. We are not bankrolled by a billionaire, our work is funded by readers like you. For our annual environment support campaign, we are asking 40,000 readers to back our journalism. Support our annual climate appeal today. 0 of 40,000 acts of support. Sam Ray asked to apologise for deaths of vulnerable elderly waiting for home care packages. Back to aged care, Liberal MP Phil Thompson asks Sam Ray whether he will apologise to the families of vulnerable elderly who have died waiting for you to do your job. Ray gives a short answer. He says the delay in the implementation of the new Aged Care Act has been broadly welcomed, but that stories of elderly Australians passing away in the aged care system are sad. He doesn't apologise. Over repeated questions, he adds, I have canvassed these matters very extensively in the Parliament over the last couple of days. I refer the member to my previous answers. Catherine King, national approach being taken on e-bikes, lithium-ion batteries. Will the government adopt minimum quality standards for e-bikes, asks Independent MP Sophie Scamps, who has a bill before Parliament to ensure imported e-bikes meet international best practice standards. Infrastructure Minister Catherine King says the bikes are the subject of inquiries in Queensland and WA. But it's clear that a broader and coordinated national system is needed. We have seen recently a number of tragic incidents involving e-bikes and scooters. At the meeting of State and Territory Transport Ministers last month, I placed this issue on the agenda. At the meeting, State and Territory Ministers agreed to develop an integrated regulatory framework for these devices to improve rider and pedestrian safety. King says concerns have also been raised about lithium-ion batteries which have caught fire. And she says work is being done to form a national approach on the safe use of those batteries. Sam Ray, in last financial year, 4,812 older Australians died in care or waiting for care. The focus is back on the aged care minister, as Coalition frontbencher Angie Bell asks Sam Ray how many older Australians have died waiting for a home care package since he was sworn in as the minister. Ray tries to quote some aged care providers who have provided supportive feedback on delaying the implementation of the Aged Care Act. And Bell gets up to make a point of order. Then we finally get a number, but it's a number for the number of deaths in the previous financial year, not since Ray took on the aged care portfolio. Sadly, we have lost a number of older Australians in care or waiting for care. In the last financial year that number was 4,812 as provided by the department. To the Senate in the hearings last week, PM withdraws unparliamentary term after TN ejected from question time. Moving away from aged care, National's Mapan Webster asks the Prime Minister why he was chased out of Ballarat by tractors last Friday. A bit of context here. Albanese was in the regional Victorian town for a Daily Telegraph Bush Summit. A video obtained by the Herald Sun shows Albanese's motorcade being chased by a convoy of tractors after the summit. Albanese initially tries to pin the blame on Angus Taylor for his support of Thevney West transmission link between Victoria and New South Wales. The protesters in Ballarat on Friday were protesting against a program that was initiated and given regulatory approval by the former government. Something that I pointed out at the time. That doesn't go down particularly well with the opposition, and particularly Lydon Tehanho shouts so much he gets kicked out by the Speaker under 94A. There's a bit of drama here because some tense words are exchanged and the opposition tries to get the Albanese to withdraw. Albanese says he said the same. Unparliamentary term that Tian said, who is by now out of the chamber. Basically dragged kicking and screaming. Albanese withdrawals were still not sure exactly what was said. Susan Ley, how many Australians have died waiting for a home care package? The opposition is going hard again on aged care today. Susan Ley takes the next question and asks him Reagan. How many Australians have died waiting for a new home care package since he was sworn in on the 13th of May? Ray says he is saddened to hear of any older Australian passing away, whether they're in care or waiting for care. There was overwhelming feedback, says Ray during his consultations with elderly people, providers and workers, that the rollout of the new bill should be delayed. Ray won't provide a number for how many elderly Australians have died waiting for a package. But he does say the deferral was previously supported by the opposition. I want to provide one of these most important quotes from the period where the decision was made. The decision to delay the start date for the new aged care reforms is the right decision for older Australians, aged care providers and home care operators. This is a quote that I think concisely and clearly summarises that decision, and it's a quote from the media release published by the Shadow Minister for Health and Aged Care, Senator Ann Ruston. Bowen says waiting to hear from experts about methane leak at Santos Darwin LNG facility. Monique Ryan gets the first crossbench question and asks the Energy Minister if he will deny gas company Santos any further approvals. After it was found Santos Darwin LNG facility has been leaking massive methane for almost 20 years. Chris Bowen starts by saying the government's safeguard reforms have been reducing emissions, but on the Santos methane leak, the Energy and Climate Change Minister says he is concerned. I am concerned to read about that. I asked my department to ensure the expert review of methane emission management which I commissioned. The government commission, led by the former chief scientist Drew Cathy Foley, examines the matters, ensures it is considered, and I will update the honourable member in the House when I have received the report from the former chief scientist. Labor tries to wedge coalition on its set zero position. The government is trying to take full advantage of Nationals Senator Matt Canavan announcing he'll introduce a bill in the Senate to repeal net zero. It's separate to the bill by Nabi Joyces in the House. It won't go anywhere, but Labor is trying to wedge the coalition with it. In the first two Dixes, one to Anthony Albanese and one to Chris Bowen, they've both attacked Canavan's bill and the disunity in his party. Albanese pointed out earlier that Canavan's supposed to be doing a review of net zero, but seems to have already come to a conclusion. Those opposite are having a review, but today we know that Senator Canavan, the person in charge of reviewing net zero for the Nats, announced he's introducing a bill in the Senate to abolish it. He's reviewing it, but he will already legislate to abolish it, to mirror the member for New England. Spoiler alert, I reckon the review will stay, it will go. Spoiler alert, that's what we see, the Liberals fighting with the Nats and they're fighting each other. Opposition continues to press aged care minister about delay in home care packages rollout. Liberal MP Zoe McKenzie directs the opposition's second question to aged care minister Sam Ray and says 85-year-old Kevin, who has been told he is on the urgent list, had registered for a home care package in March this year, but was told by the department that he couldn't get an assessment until early next year. She asks whether anyone like Kevin had asked the government to delay the home care packages. Ray, with his single sheet of notepaper, tells McKenzie to provide him with Kevin's details to follow up his case. The aged care minister says the new system will help to reduce wait times and that the current assessment waitlist includes people who are now accessing a lower level of care in the aged care system. He also said this to the House yesterday. Milton Dick tells everyone to quiet down before McKenzie tries to make a point of order. She says Ray hasn't answered her question, which is whether any elderly Australians told the government to delay the rollout of the home care packages. Dick tells her she can't raise a point of order just because she doesn't like the answer she's hearing. Ray continues, big reforms don't happen overnight, but we are working hand in hand with assessment organisations, including states and territories, to minimise impacts to older Australians and get them the care they deserve. While Labor spins lines about cohesion, its inhumane migration choices betray a disregard for human rights. Elijah Buell, The Guardian. At this moment, a democratically elected government of a Western nation is preparing to pass a bill that would see non-citizens deported without giving them proper warning or the chance to challenge the decision. That same government is making secret deals worth almost $500 million with questionable overseas regimes to ship migrants and refugees offshore, all while avoiding accountability and scrutiny. But this isn't a story from modern-day America, a situation constantly held up as a horrific example of government overreach at the cost of the most vulnerable in society. This is our Australian government. This isn't an aberration or a response to extraordinary circumstances. This is a pattern. Last year, the Labor government
Ha ha ha, this is happening in Australia. All these things, Australia, 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 Australia. Ha 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 ha, fuck you. I love you. I love you. Take care, buddy. Look after yourself.
Introduced 3 brutal migration bills which struck fear into the heart of the community and tarnished Australia's reputation on human rights on the global stage. It may have pivoted back to unity and hope during the election campaign, but with a larger majority now secured, it is doubling down on degradation. While putting retention of power above human rights and community cohesion is unacceptable at any time, an excuse of political expediency may have been meekly offered as a means of strengthening a weakness against Peter Dutton's opposition. Sign up. Oh, breaking news email. Now that fig leaf has been stripped away, leaving only the shocking reality of a disregard for human rights, human safety and human dignity. The government was quick to condemn this weekend's marches, to call for calm and unity, and to bolster its perceived image as an administration for all Australians. But again, this offered only a brief respite from its own inhumane choices. Actions speak far louder than words, and this government's actions are telling us all we need to know. They are telling us that this will not end with a certain cohort of people. There is no line in the sand, no depths to which this government will not sink. This is not hyperbole, this is proven reality. They are telling us that the safety of those who have fled unimaginable danger in the search of a new home, a new community, a new start can no longer rely on the cornerstones of fairness, justice and equity. They are telling us that, while they spin lines about multiculturalism and cohesion, with these laws they are willing to bend a knee to the worst of the toxic and hate-filled tendencies this country can possibly demonstrate. They are telling us that the bedrock of our country, that our laws and rules apply equally, no matter where you were born, has collapsed beneath us. We must not watch in shock and sadness. We must fight for human rights, not just for those in the firing line of these policies, but for the Australia we wish to see. An Australia where people like me can arrive as an unaccompanied minor, orphaned by war and having grown up in a Ugandan refugee camp, and rise to contribute to my adopted home, where the neighbours, church, teachers and community members who supported and welcomed me and many others are treated as the example, not the exception. Where a fair go applies to all. It is clear that a vote for such values does not deliver them. We must stand up for human rights and make clear enough is enough. Together, we can turn the tide towards a true compassionate nation. Elijah Buol OAM is a former refugee and CEO of the Asylum Seekers Centre in Sydney.
This is The Guardian. Thousands attended anti-immigration rallies around the country on the weekend.
It doesn't feel like the country I grew up in anymore. I always hear foreign languages and foreign people stare at me with hostility.
Among those were neo-Nazi groups and far-right figures who have captured the headlines.
Chaos and violence as anger took over the streets of Melbourne.
The organisers have distanced the events from white supremacists. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has said some good people attended too.
Of course, there's always good people will turn up to demonstrate their views about particular issues, but what we have here is neo-Nazis being given a platform.
But the protests have also been widely condemned as hateful. Today, independent researcher into right-wing extremism, Dr. Kaz Ross, on whether we're seeing a growing anti-immigration movement in Australia and an emboldened far-right. It's Wednesday, the 3rd of September. Welcome to the podcast, Kaz.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to start by asking you about those protests on the weekend. Do you think, from what we saw, that we're in a new moment in Australia when it comes to anti-immigration sentiment?
Yeah, absolutely. If we can just compare two kind of key moments in the recent past, the first is 10 years ago, we had a Reclaim Australia movement, which was basically an anti-Islam movement. It never really shifted into a full-on anti-immigration movement. So it was always focused on Muslims in Australia. And then another key moment was 2 years ago when neo-Nazis held a protest in Victoria on the steps of Parliament House, and it was an anti-immigration protest. They called for a mass mobilisation. No one came. It was just them. So in that period from 2 years ago to now, we see a big shift in the popularity of this idea that immigrants are causing all the problems that we face in Australia and that people need to somehow rise up and change immigration.
We know that March for Australia arranged the march. They have distanced themselves from white supremacists. But we do know that neo-Nazis attended and promoted the protests. So tell us more about these neo-Nazi groups that were there. Who are they?
So this is something, again, it tracks back to 10 years ago, Reclaim Australia, where a number of neo-Nazis ended up taking over that grassroots movement. Out of that comes a group called the United Patriots Front, which people may have heard of from years ago, a neo-Nazi political group. It failed. Out of that came a group called the Lads Society. People may remember them. They tried to infiltrate the Young Nationals Party in New South Wales, and they were caught and booted out of the Young Nationals. So from the Lads Society comes this group, National Socialist Network, and their model is, it's called an active club model, which is a train and tribe model. So it's a model that comes from American neo-Nazis. The idea is that it's open to all white men to get together to train together. So they do kickboxing, they do running, they do weightlifting, those sorts of things. So they train as fighters, basically. They do that a couple of times a week in small groups, and then they get together to tribe, which is bring all the families together and create a big community. And this has been an extremely successful model for this group. So they've gone from one member about 4 or 5 years ago. They've grown to, well, recently we saw 140 of them marching at midnight in the centre of Melbourne, all dressed in black. So this is a movement that it's probably got, I'd say, about 180 active members. But because of Train and Tribe model, they have a much wider support base as well.
So they use different activities, by the sounds of it, to make them look a little bit family-friendly in a way.
Yeah, and they've worked out, the leader, Thomas Sewell, has worked out that one of the main reasons men leave the Nazi movement is they get girlfriends. And the girlfriends say, well, it's either me or the Nazis, and guess what? The guys all leave. So they've worked that out now. So they basically ensure that when you get your girlfriend, you bring her to meet the crew. So right from the beginning, she's in on what you're actually doing. They also recruit young men and young women. So they might have girls as young as 15 or 16 who contact them. They use the attractive members to get out there on the social media platforms and basically flirt with young girls online, and then bring them into the movement. And of course, their idea is that women don't need educations, women don't need jobs, women should be stay-at-home baby machines. And so this is a tragic situation where their aim is the 18-year-old young mum with a kid who's now alienated from her family. So they then create a sort of a women's auxiliary, so that keeps the men all in place. They create big family sort of events to keep everybody together to create a Nazi community.
So they've altered their tactics. If we come back to these rallies, why do they want to insert themselves into these protests? What is the point of it? Is it recruitment? Is it to provoke violence?
There's a couple of things there. The first is what they're trying to achieve is crossover acceptability to the more mainstream right wing. So they describe themselves as the vanguard, the tip of the spear. We're there to protect you, the men in black.
So they're trying to normalise their views?
Yeah, so what they're saying is, you normal everyday Aussies flying your Australian flags, we're there to protect you. So in Victoria was where the violence occurred. In the other states, the neo-Nazis had different roles depending on which state it was in. But overall, the ones that were dressed up in their uniforms were there to say, we're the show of strength. If anybody tries to counter this protest, we'll run through them and we will protect you. So that was one role that in Melbourne they say they played very, very successfully because they managed to protect the march. And when the leader of the movement, Thomas Sewell, stood on the steps of Victorian Parliament behind a podium, he'd achieved huge success. Last time he'd been standing there was just him and a whole lot of Victorian police. This time there was maybe 4,000 people listening to what he had to say. Their second thing was recruiting. So they were handing out information leaflets for their movement while they were there. That's the second thing that they had. The third thing is propaganda. These groups work really well with social media. Many of their stunts are carried out at a weird time of night, like you're protesting at a shopping centre at 3 o'clock in the morning. There's no one there. So it's clear you're not aiming at the people at the shopping centre. You're aiming to produce some really cool footage, which you're then going to use in your propaganda.
For online to try and recruit people.
Yeah, they use that propaganda to recruit and also to improve their status in the worldwide neo-Nazi movement.
Shadow Immigration Minister Paul Scar condemned the extremes at the rally, but he also agreed that Middle Australia was there. What does that mean? Does that mean that neo-Nazis are capturing a genuine concern? Or is there some blurring of the lines and crossover in beliefs that come from so-called Middle Australia?
Yeah, I think it's both there. I mean, there's no doubt that housing is a huge issue for many Australians, and if it's not for them, it's for their kids. No doubt about that. So it is a genuine issue. However, blaming it all on immigration is a very simplistic approach. That has worked very well for the far right and for neo-Nazis. The other thing to say is that this idea that it's proud to be Australian, Aussie, oi, oi, all of that has always appealed to a certain section of the population who like to come out and wave their flags. And we're in the middle of a massive culture war. And in that culture war, there's this idea that has spread that it's not okay to love Australia, it's not okay to love the flag. And, you know, those left-wing people, they don't want us to be proud to be Australian. So there's this general mobilisation of, you could call the right, even the middle of the right. And also there's another thing, which is these particular groups, such as the neo-Nazis, constantly say it's okay to be racist. You know, we should be racist, and to be racist means to love Australia. We're just looking after Australia. So they're tapping into a long history of racism as well.
Oh, he cuts it. Cuts it, Hector.
Well,
so they're not just using the mums and dads
who don't align with the National Socialist Network. There were many, many people. Some people say that there will be more and more rallies, but actually for the neo-Nazis, I believe they've achieved what they needed to achieve, which is people shaking their hands, crossover appeal. This was the first time they've ever marched with their masks off. So they've taken a punt that people don't care anymore that you're an actual Nazi because, hey, you love Australia and you don't burn the flag, so that's okay to be a Nazi. So they've taken a bet that they are now more acceptable. And I think they don't need to march. They will basically just let the right-wing patriot movement do that and do their thing.
Okay.
Because what they're
Cut it out. Doesn't matter.
New South Wales government announces $1 million to address impacts of Islamophobia, multicultural New South Wales. Friday the 15th of August 2025. The New South Wales government has today announced $1 million in funding to help tackle Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hate in New South Wales. The grant, which is funded by the Premier's Department and Multicultural New South Wales, will support the Action Against Islamophobia initiative. The initiative aims to provide support for people affected by Islamophobia. The New South Wales government's contribution will fund a Report Islamophobia support line, case management and support services for people impacted by Islamophobia, advocacy and building awareness of how to report incidents, community education and training for police and other frontline services on how to respond to incidents. This announcement comes as community organisations have reported an increase in Islamophobia in Australia in recent years. This is despite waves of migration, including from Muslim communities, contributing immensely to the social fabric and growth of our state. Research by the Scanlon Foundation Research Institute has found that negative attitudes toward Muslims have remained at concerningly high levels across the last 10 years, with a particular rise since 2024. The Action Against Islamophobia program is run by the Australian National Imams Council (ANIC) and aims to both combat Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hate while supporting those who are subject to it. Premier of New South Wales Chris Minns said, "Naked racism and Islamophobia have no place in our state or our country, and it is abhorrent that people perpetuate this sort of behaviour. Anecdotal evidence presented to me indicates that Islamophobia is far higher than what is reported. We don't want Australians suffering in silence or enduring racism without help or support. We are proud to be partnering with the Australian National Imams Council to support those dealing with the trauma that Islamophobia causes. This program will play a critical role in providing support to those who have been affected by this hatred while also spreading awareness of the importance of rejecting racism in all its forms." Minister for Multiculturalism Steve Camper said, "New South Wales is one of the world's most successful multicultural success stories, and we need to call out racism when we see it. To safeguard our vibrant multiculturalism, we must ensure we're putting the plans in place to stamp out hatred, like that faced by our Muslim community. Greater visibility and a broader understanding of this issue is extremely important, helping inform how we work towards eliminating this sort of bigotry." Australian National Imams Council (ANIC) President Imam Shadi Al-Suleiman said, "This rise in anti-Muslim hate has left many Muslims anxious about engaging in their daily religious activities, such as praying in mosques or leaving the house wearing the hijab. Islamophobia manifests itself in the community in several different ways, and we've seen an increase in microaggressions that are often brushed off as ignorance or rude behaviour. Understanding how Muslims experience Islamophobia will help guide our approach to combating the issue on a holistic level."
Yeah.
Check out this crazy column in the Australian.
Whoa.
Crazy column in the Australian on Friday. Check out this crazy column in the Australian on Friday.
Band's rants seem to borrow from Hitler's playbook.
Yes, that is our national broadsheet, comparing Australia's Greens Party leader to Adolf Hitler, in what must surely be a new low for the Murdoch-owned paper that is currently celebrating its 60th birthday. The author was Melbourne businessman Francis Galbally, and he didn't make just one passing quip about Bant and Hitler. He did so repeatedly, with comments like,
"The first thing that we notice is there's no steps. NDIS houses are the best investments in the world. They've got their intercom. You notice all the switches are giant size.
It's an investment scheme where the promises are dazzling.
One NDIS house is going to get you through the best schools in Australia. It's going to help people."
It's been 7 years, Richard Boyle says, have left him broken. The death of It's been 7 years, Richard Boyle says, have left him broken. The whistleblower emerged from court to jubilation. South Australia's District Court recorded no conviction or jail time.
Hello, I'm Linton Besser. Welcome to Media Watch. And tonight, a federal whistleblower facing the prospect of years in prison is instead granted compassion by a South Australian judge and allowed to walk free.
I just want to say thank you to all the supporters. That's all for today. Thank you very much.
Richard Boyle's life story took its dramatic turn in 2018 when this groundbreaking investigation exposed the aggressive tactics used by the Australian Taxation Office to recover debts, seizing funds, destroying businesses and pushing some taxpayers to the brink.
We were essentially ordered and directed to start doing standard garnishes on every case.
It's been 7 years, Richard Boyle says, have left him broken. The whistleblower emerged from court to jubilation. South Australia's District Court recorded.
Where is this one?
Well, we've got the latest immigration numbers. Get a load of this. We've got the latest immigration numbers. Get a load of this. Every day, Australia is taking in 1,544 new people. That's the equivalent of 5 fully loaded Boeing 787 Dreamliners.
Hello, I'm Linton Besser. Welcome to Media Watch. And first tonight, the tsunami of migrants threatening to overwhelm the country, as Radio 2GB shock jock Ben Fordham explained last week.
In the first 6 months of this year, we've had 279,000 arrivals. That's more people than the population of Hobart. 5 Dreamliners landing every day. 1 Canberra added every year. When's it going to stop?
So enthused by his Dreamliner analogy, Fordham continued taking to the sky.
5 fully loaded Boeing 787 Dreamliners. 1,544 people a day. 5 Dreamliners landing every day.
Over on Adelaide's 5AA, Graham Goodings was also rather fond of Fordham's clever airliner device.
Dreamliner after Dreamliner, jumbo jet after jumbo jet flying into this country. In every 3 years, another city the size of Adelaide, effectively.
Worse still, his fellow presenter warned these people might be diseased.
We don't know their vaccination history. No. So if they haven't had the measles or the chicken pox or whatever the case might be, there's a potential that that virus comes into our country.
Right-wing lobby group Advance used an AI-generated video to finesse the point.
1,544 new migrants every single day.
1,544 more people who need housing.
1,544 more people competing for jobs and schools.
Memories of the campaign for Brexit. So, where did the 1,500 a day figure come from? Best we can see, it came courtesy of the Institute of Public Affairs, a conservative think tank which 11 days ago warned Australia's economy was being pummeled by excessive migration. All on the basis of data published by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. But most inconvenient for the media was this little disclaimer from the Bureau.
This data does not reflect the official ABS definition of migration and may lead to inaccurate interpretations.
And?
Should not be used as a measure of overseas migration.
Which the IPA did attempt to explain, and which the ABS also tried to drive home when it contacted those journalists so dazzled by the IPA's glittering calculations, before straightening out the record itself.
Multiple media stories have been published this week using overseas arrivals and departures data, which may lead to inaccurate conclusions on migration.
In fact, there are reliable migration numbers laying about. And what do they show?
Over the 12 months to 31st of December 2024, net overseas migration was estimated at 341,000, a decrease of 190,000, 36%.
Which paints a somewhat different picture, no? And while, yes, the data has been used as an indicator of long-term migration trends, the experts we spoke to assured us that rather than being overwhelmed by migrants, in fact, we're getting fewer.
It is our expectation that net overseas migration will continue to fall when the next round of numbers is published in September.
We asked Ben Fordham about the figures, and sadly, we didn't hear back. On his show this morning, however, he insisted that even if the real numbers were lower, concerns about migration remain valid. With his guest, the economist Leith Van Onselen, explaining,
"They're not perfect, they're not as accurate as the official numbers, but we use them all the time because we have to."
And that's exactly the kind of nuance that was missing on radio last week. Because while immigration is an important public debate, it's also freighted with emotion. Not least because the fear of foreigners is as old as time and too often has been drawn upon by outlets thirsting for audience. The 1,500 migrants a day story has now taken seed across social media ahead of anti-migrant rallies this Sunday. That migration is actually expected to fall will matter not one little bit. Now we turn to what was billed as a world-exclusive interview broadcast on primetime Australian television last week.
It is the interview that has got the entire world talking, the conversation between Sherry Markson and Benjamin Netanyahu.
On Thursday, Sky News Australia landed the interview that was the envy of news networks across the globe. An exclusive 16 minutes with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. Through the week, Sky News' Walkley award-winning Sherry Markson was breaking news about the steady deterioration of the relationship between Australia and Israel in the wake of a decision by Anthony Albanese to support the formal recognition of a Palestinian state. She obtained a copy of the highly critical letter Netanyahu had sent the Australian Prime Minister and reported Netanyahu's social media spray, which accused the Australian PM of being weak, which is why Markson opened her landmark interview like this.
Why do you believe history will remember him as a weak politician?
I think his record is forever tarnished by the weakness that he showed in the face of these Hamas terrorist monsters.
The exchange prompting news reports across the media. Markson also asked a sharp question about rumours of an imminent ceasefire.
Is this true, and do you still plan to take over Gaza and eliminate the terrorists if they do agree to a deal?
Well, we're going to do that anyway.
But between these bookends, what would you have asked a world leader whose military campaign has killed tens of thousands of people and prompted waves of protest at home and across the world? Here's what was on Sherry Markson's interview clipboard.
Have you been shocked at the anti-Semitism, the violence, the hatred you've seen unfolding on our streets here in Australia, and then the lack of action and the lack of leadership from the very top, from our Prime Minister?
Well, I was very dismayed.
Bibi was then invited to wax lyrical on any resemblance he sees between Albo and those who thought they could do a deal with Adolf Hitler.
Is this word appeasement a direct reference to how Europe dealt with Hitler in the 1930s? And do you think we're seeing from leaders like Albanese and others a similar complacency now?
It's exactly what we're seeing.
Markson did ask about the persistent allegations of starvation and genocide in Gaza, prefacing those allegations as false and defamatory.
Part of the problem here is that there is a very effective propaganda campaign being run against Israel. The Albanese government is aiding and abetting it, so are some media outlets. Prime Minister, what do you say to the libels that Israel is deliberately starving Palestinian children and is conducting a genocide in Gaza?
And otherwise giving Benjamin Netanyahu, potentially the most consequential world leader at that very minute, a free pass, with much nodding and enthusiasm.
You will encourage more and more and more of this radicalism in your own country, in your own children.
Absolutely.
And you...
In all, Sherry Markson asked Benjamin Netanyahu 8 questions, but not one which might have put him on the spot. Not even about pointed criticism from prominent figures in Australia's Jewish community, who 24 hours earlier had written to Netanyahu decrying his comments about Albanese as inflammatory and bound to incite yet more anti-Semitism down under. On Friday, we asked several of this country's most experienced journalists to give their assessment of Sky News' world exclusive. One was Michael Gowenda, a former editor of The Age newspaper and contributor to The Australian, who has written of his deep connection with Israel. He told us,
"This was the definition of a soft interview. It was beyond soft. It was not journalism. There was not a single challenging question. Indeed, the questions weren't questions at all, but statements of agreement with what Benjamin Netanyahu had said about Australia and Albanese in particular, so that all he had to do was agree."
Gowenda said he would have asked Netanyahu about those criticisms made by the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, and Gowenda is not alone. Potentially Australia's most well-known television journalist, Ray Martin, told us Sharri Markson should have asked about them too. He added,
"It was clearly not an interview, but a sycophantic endorsement of Benjamin Netanyahu. It failed journalism 101. There was no attempt at balance. There was not one critical question. Good on her for getting an exclusive interview, but it was a wasted opportunity."
Helen Daly, formerly of Channel 9's storied Sunday program and a former anchor at Sky News Australia, told us she too was disappointed.
The Sky News interview was a missed opportunity to even slightly challenge a political leader of a country engaged in war. Not one challenging or probing question.
In contrast, the same interview conducted by a daytime news anchor at Sky News' American counterpart included questions like these.
Your own soldiers have been accused of killing innocent Gazans who are in line for food. That's the accusation, almost on a daily basis. Can you defend that?
Yeah, I could deny it.
Will you allow more independent reporters to go into Gaza and see it for themselves?
We asked the decorated veteran television interviewer Kerry O'Brien for his view.
Sharri Markson might as well have simply handed Benjamin Netanyahu a microphone and said, "Let me know when you're finished."
O'Brien and his peers shared with us some of the questions they would have asked the Israeli PM. They're on our website, and I'd encourage you to read them. This morning, Sharri Markson told us it was important that her viewers hear Netanyahu explain Israel's efforts to avoid civilian casualties and deliver aid, and that,
unlike the left-leaning figures Media Watch spoke to, who no longer work in mainstream media, I've been inundated with high praise from leading editors and journalists describing the interview as outstanding, first class, and agenda-setting.
a spokesperson for Sky News told us that if the ABC believes it could have done a better job, it should secure its own interview with Netanyahu, and
the ABC has spent a decade trying to discredit Sharri Markson's reporting, including falsely dismissing her accurate investigation into COVID-19's origins as a conspiracy. The ABC has a long history of anti-Israel bias and is in no position to lecture others on objectivity in journalism.
With a track record of breaking news and a Rolodex of politicians willing to take her call, few could really argue Sharri Markson is an unserious journalist. But for me, this interview crossed the line into open advocacy for the Netanyahu government. Landing the Israeli PM was clearly a serious get, but what Sky News delivered was also a dud, which denied audiences their only chance to see Netanyahu tested from an Australian point of view and to think more deeply, not just about Anthony Albanese's divisive diplomatic decision, but also about one of the most awful conflagrations in the history of the Middle East. And now to the world's premier technology magazine, which a few months ago reported a startling and bizarre twist to modern romance.
Welcome to the new frontier of love, the hyper-niche internet wedding. More couples are choosing to host their ceremonies in the very digital spaces where they first met, bonded, and built their lives.
The author, a rather elegant Margot Blanchard, managed to land an interview with a digital celebrant who, between putting virtual rings on virtual fingers, gave readers a glimpse into her busy schedule.
I've had couples exchange vows using emoji reactions. I've had Discord bots cue the processional music. I've seen Twitch chats cry in real time.
And while I assure you I do happen to know what she's talking about, it seems that since offering these telling remarks, Jennifer Hugh has vanished without trace. Also gone missing, the article itself.
Wired editorial leadership has determined this article does not meet our editorial standards.
And which of the magazine standards are those? Oh, just that it's articles about technology, not be written by technology. Because, as you've already guessed, Dear Margot is, in all likelihood, a robot. Though it must be said, a rather productive one. With a slew of bylines about Disneyland, mental health and censorship. The articles featuring people and places which unfortunately do not exist, as well as stirring first-person reportage like this in Business Insider.
My home had turned into a never-ending workplace. My son would pull at my sleeve while I was finishing a report, his little face hopeful.
What tosh? She can't have sleeves, she doesn't have arms. Which might be partly why Business Insider also scrubbed Margot's purpling prose from its website. The dirty laundry being nicely aired by, would you believe it, a flesh and bone reporter at Britain's Press Gazette. So, when it was first pitched up, why didn't a tech-savvy outfit like Wired check the article first? Answer, it did.
A Wired editor ran the story through 2 third-party AI detection tools, both of which said that the copy was likely to be human-generated.
Which will no doubt have news editors everywhere breaking into a cold sweat. Margot's true identity only laid bare by dint of actual research by actual humans. Difficult news too for our bean-counting masters. Turns out you can't sack us all, or at least not yet. And that's all from us tonight. Be sure to check us out on ABC iView, as well as YouTube, Facebook and X. You can find full statements on our website. And don't forget to send us your tips. I'll see you next week. A flesh and bone reporter at Britain's Press Gazette. So, when it was first pitched up, why didn't a tech-savvy outfit like Wired
Phone comparisons, Google Pixel 10 vs Samsung Galaxy S25. This time around, we're comparing the latest vanilla smartphone from Google vs the cheapest Galaxy S25 smartphone. In other words, we'll be comparing Google Pixel 10 vs Samsung Galaxy S25. Both of these smartphones are actually quite compact, the most compact in their series. So if you're looking for a compact smartphone to buy these days, and you want a powerful phone, well, these two should be taken into consideration. As per usual, we'll first list the specifications of both smartphones, and we'll then move to compare them across a number of other sections. We'll be comparing their displays, performance, battery life, cameras, and audio output. There is plenty to talk about here, so let's get started, shall we? Specs: Google Pixel 10, Samsung Galaxy S25. Dimensions: 152.8 x 72 by 8.6 millimeters, 146.9 by 70.5 by 7.2 millimeters. Weight: 204 grams, 162 grams. Display: 6.3-inch Actua OLED display, 6.2-inch dynamic LTPO AMOLED 2X. Refresh rate: smooth display 60-120 Hz, 1-120 Hz adaptive. Resolution: 2424 x 1080, 2340 x 1080. Chipset: Google Tensor G5, Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy. RAM: 12GB LPDDR5X. Storage: 128GB 256GB. 128 gigabytes, 256 gigabytes, 512 gigabytes, UFS 4.0. Main camera, 48 megapixels f1.7 aperture, 1/2.0 inch sensor size, 82 degree FOV. 50 megapixels wide, f1.8 aperture, 1/1.56 inch sensor size, 1.0 pixel size, dual pixel PDAF, OIS. Ultra wide camera, 13 megapixels f2.2 aperture, 1/3.1 inch sensor size, 120 degree FOV. 12 megapixels f2.2 aperture, 1/2.55 inch sensor size, 120 degree FOV, 1.4 pixel size. Telephoto camera, NA. 10 megapixels f2.4 aperture, 1/3.94 inch sensor size, 1.0 pixel size, PDAF, OIS, 3x optical zoom. Periscope telephoto camera, 10.8 megapixels f3.1 aperture, 1/3.2 inch sensor size, 5x optical zoom, 23 degree FOV. NA. Selfie camera, 10.5 megapixels f2.2 aperture, 95 degree FOV. 12 megapixels f2.2 aperture, 1/3.2 inch sensor size, 1.12 pixel size. Battery size, 4,970 milliamp hours. 4,000 milliamp hours. Charging, 30W wired, 15W Qi2 wireless charger not included. 25W wired, 15W wireless Qi2 ready, 4.5W reverse wireless charger not included. Colors, indigo, frost, lemongrass, obsidian. Icy blue, mint, navy, silver shadow, pink gold, coral red, blue black. Google Pixel 10 vs Samsung Galaxy S25 design. While there are some similarities design-wise, there are a lot of differences between them. When it comes to similarities, let's just say that both smartphones are made out of aluminium and glass. They both have rounded corners, while they're boxy otherwise. Their front and back sides are flat, while the frame on both smartphones is flat all around. The edges are not sharp, though, for comfort's sake. The Google Pixel 10 has a larger display camera hole and slightly thicker bezels. Bezels on both smartphones are uniform, though. Both smartphones include physical buttons on the right-hand side. The Pixel 10 has a power lock button above the volume up and down keys, while the Samsung Galaxy S25 has a power lock button below the volume rocker keys. Those are the only physical buttons on both smartphones. If we flip them around, you'll notice considerably different camera setups. The Google Pixel 10 features a camera bar up top, which is horizontally oriented. That camera bar does protrude on the back and hosts 3 cameras. The Galaxy S25 has 3 separate camera rings on the back, which are vertically aligned in the top left corner. Each of those cameras protrudes directly from the backplate. The Galaxy S25 has a slightly smaller display, but it's considerably more compact, mainly due to the thinness of its bezels. It is shorter, narrower, and thinner than the Pixel 10. On top of that, it's quite a bit lighter too. Automation over labor. Apple pushes robotics in supplier factories. Back in the day, factories were largely operated by people. Each person would perform one task and pass it down the line. These days, people are still involved, but obviously, shifting to automated systems would make the entire process a lot more efficient. So much so that Apple is now demanding that its suppliers switch to robotics for manufacturing. Apple wants suppliers to use more robotics. In an exclusive report from Digitimes, the publication cites sources familiar with the matter who reveal that Apple is now requiring its suppliers to adopt the use of robotics in the manufacturing process. This means that if anyone wants to supply to Apple, having robotics in the manufacturing process is essentially a standard prerequisite. One of the reasons for this is because Apple wants to minimize its dependency on labor. They also want to stabilize product quality and ensure uniformity across different facilities. This is also part of Apple's plan to reduce long-term production costs while it diversifies away from China. However, Apple won't be the one to fork out the cash to move this automation process along. The report claims that Apple expects its suppliers to fund their own automation upgrades. This is a stark change from the past, where Apple would actually invest in tooling and machinery for its manufacturers. This isn't about Apple being generous, but more about the company ensuring that its suppliers can meet its specifications and standards. Hardly a surprising move. That being said, we can't say we're shocked that Apple insists on more automation and less human labor. In the past, some of Apple's suppliers, such as Foxconn, have encountered issues like worker strikes. By introducing robotics and automation, Apple reduces the chance of these types of things happening again. There is no doubt that the upfront costs for these manufacturers will be high. However, it might pay off in the long run. First of all, Apple is a huge customer and winning their contracts could ensure the company makes a lot of money. Secondly, these automations could also be used for non-Apple work and improve their overall efficiency. We've already seen how that could pay off. Back when TSMC was trying to land a contract with Apple, it invested billions into its foundries. However, it was a good investment as TSMC now manufactures semiconductors for some of the world's largest tech companies, such as Apple, Nvidia, Qualcomm, AMD, and more. Qualcomm stock forecast. Should you buy, sell or hold this tech and semiconductor giant? Thinking about Qualcomm stock and whether it's time to buy, sell or hold? You're not alone. Many retail investors are watching this tech giant closely, and for good reason. Qualcomm has its hands in everything from mobile chips to 5G infrastructure. And it tends to make headlines every few months. If you're unsure about what move to make next, this guide is here to help. Let's unpack what's really going on with Qualcomm stock, so you can make an informed decision with confidence. Table of contents. Qualcomm at a glance, what you need to know. The role Qualcomm plays in the tech ecosystem. Recent performance, how is Qualcomm stock doing? 5G growth and Qualcomm's edge. Risks, what could go wrong with Qualcomm? Analyst ratings, should you trust them? Dividend investors, is Qualcomm a good pick? Buy, sell, or hold, what's the verdict? Conclusion. Facts. Qualcomm at a glance, what you need to know. Before you even think about clicking buy or sell, it's crucial to understand what Qualcomm actually does. Qualcomm Incorporated, ticker QCOM, is a semiconductor and telecom equipment company. Best known for its Snapdragon processors that power most Android smartphones. If you've ever owned a Samsung or OnePlus, there's a good chance Qualcomm had something to do with it. But Qualcomm isn't just riding on smartphone chips. They've built a significant presence in wireless communication patents, which earn them billions in licensing fees. This kind of recurring revenue is golden, especially during hardware downturns. They've also been shifting gears into automotive semiconductors and IoT Internet of Things, hoping to capitalize on long-term industry shifts. All of this means Qualcomm isn't a one-trick pony. Even when the smartphone market softens, the company has other legs to stand on. If diversification is something you value in a stock, Qualcomm's got it in spades. Tested solutions for every industry. Wholesale and dealership, warehouse automation solutions for wholesalers and dealerships, optimizing inventory management, order fulfillment, and operational efficiency to boost profitability and reduce errors. Learn more. Easy to run solutions for retail and e-commerce businesses, optimizing inventory management, order fulfillment, and customer experience. Driving efficiency and profitability. Learn more. Solution that helps track, manage, and optimize assets in real time, reducing losses, improving utilization, and ensuring smooth operations across industries. Learn more. Optimize inventory, streamline production workflows, and reduce errors with real-time data and mobile solutions. Enhancing efficiency and boosting profitability. Learn more. Streamlines order fulfillment, automates stock tracking, and ensures efficient delivery management. Helping businesses optimize logistics and improve customer satisfaction. Learn more. The role Qualcomm plays in the tech ecosystem. Qualcomm is like the brain behind the scenes. It's not always front and center in flashy tech product launches, but without it, many of our everyday devices wouldn't perform the way they do. From mobile devices to Wi-Fi routers, this company's tech is deeply embedded in our lives. One of Qualcomm's strongest positions is in 5G infrastructure. You may have heard of 5G tech. But here's a fun fact. Qualcomm was one of the earliest players in this space. The company owns a suite of intellectual properties that form the backbone of global 5G communications. That gives them both power and leverage over competitors, power that translates to revenue through licensing and hardware sales. Qualcomm's foothold in the industry isn't just deep, it's wide. Their semiconductors power everything from premium smartphones to budget devices. And they've recently expanded partnerships with car manufacturers to supply smart chips for connected vehicles. When you think about Qualcomm, don't just think phone chip, think digital infrastructure, and you'll begin to understand their real value. Recent performance. How is Qualcomm stock doing? Stock performance is often the first thing investors look at. So how has Qualcomm fared recently? To put it simply, it's been a roller coaster. Like most tech stocks, Qualcomm saw explosive growth during the 2020-2021 period. Thanks to strong demand for smartphones and 5G adoption, the company's revenue and stock price both soared. However, the tide started to turn during 2022 and into 2023 due to supply chain issues, global inflation, rising interest rates, and a slowdown in consumer electronics purchases. All these factors spooked investors, not just in Qualcomm but across the semiconductor industry. Despite these headwinds, Qualcomm has remained profitable and continued to expand its product pipeline. Long-term investors might see a buying opportunity when stock prices dip like this, especially when the company's fundamentals stay firm. So if you're waiting for a buy the dip moment, now could be the time to pay attention. 5G growth and Qualcomm's edge. Let's talk 5G, because it's one of the reasons people are betting on Qualcomm for the long haul. Qualcomm has been instrumental in developing 5G chips and standards, and they've got the patents to prove it. In fact, almost every phone with 5G connectivity includes Qualcomm hardware or licensed technology. As more devices, from smartphones to smart homes to self-driving cars, connect through 5G networks, the demand for high-performance chips will explode. Qualcomm is positioning itself as the go-to supplier for this kind of premium hardware. They're not just reactive, this company spends billions on R&D to stay ahead of the curve. While other chip makers scramble to play catch-up, Qualcomm is already cashing in on its investments. That gives them a unique edge. If you believe in the 5G revolution or evolution, holding Qualcomm stock could be a smart long-term move. Risks. What could go wrong with Qualcomm? No stock is bulletproof, and Qualcomm is no exception. There's always the risk of cyclical downturns. Semiconductors operate in boom and bust cycles. 1 year demand is off the charts, the next it tanks. It's the nature of the business and something potential investors must accept. Another looming threat is regulatory scrutiny. Qualcomm has faced antitrust lawsuits in the US, China, and Europe over its licensing practices. While some issues have been resolved, the legal shadows haven't completely gone away. If any government imposes heavy penalties or new restrictions, it could dent the company's profits big time. Lastly, competition is heating up. Companies like MediaTek, Samsung, and Apple are developing their own chips. Apple in particular started building custom silicon for its devices, potentially reducing its future dependency on Qualcomm. It's a risk that shouldn't be ignored, especially if Qualcomm loses major clients. Analyst ratings. Should you trust them? Wall Street analysts love making headlines with their price targets and ratings. But should you follow their advice blindly? Short answer, nope. While analysts can offer valuable insights, their ratings are often reactive instead of predictive. One bad earnings call, and you'll see 7 downgraded reports overnight. As of the latest updates, most analysts are leaning buy or hold on Qualcomm. That's because the company continues to generate solid free cash flow. It maintains a healthy balance sheet, and it has long-term growth potential, especially in non-smartphone segments like automotive and IoT. If you read analysts' reports, difference matters. Ultimately, no one cares more about your portfolio than you, so trust but verify everything you read. Dividend investors. Is Qualcomm a good pick? Let's not forget dividend lovers. Qualcomm shines here too. The company pays a consistent and reliable dividend, with a yield that often hovers above 2%. It might not shoot the payout ratio. That shows management's confidence in the long-term business strategy. It's also a good sign for shareholders who want to see their returns compound year over year. If you're building a Google Pixel 10 series camera review. Still great, but Google should be worried. Android Central. Image credit. Nicholas Sutrich. Android Central. Google's Pixel phones are often regarded as some of the best in terms of imaging. Thanks to Google's phenomenal computational photography and use of AI, Pixel phones make it easy to capture great photos without putting much thought into the process. In this deeper dive into the Pixel 10 cameras, Android Central writers Nick Sutrich and Derek Lee put Google's latest flagship AI phones to the test. Nick tests the Pixel 10 Pro devices, while Derek tests the base Pixel 10. Both capture images in various locations and scenarios. Comparing the results to those of other Android and Pixel devices, Nick even visits the Biltmore estate, where Taylor Swift's forthcoming wedding is rumored to take place. Is Google still the camera king? Let's see how these phones do. You may like today's best Pixel 10 deals. No contract, unlimited mins, unlimited texts, 50 GB data, calls, standard national talk and text within Australia. Fair Go policy applies. Texts, standard national SMS and MMS to standard Australian mobiles. Minimum total cost $1,388.56. No contract, unlimited mins, unlimited texts, 60 GB data, texts, standard national SMS and MMS. Minimum total cost $2,051.72. No contract, unlimited mins, unlimited texts, 50 GB data, calls, standard national talk and text within Australia. Fair go policy applies. Texts, standard national SMS and MMS to standard Australian mobiles. Minimum total cost $1,738.48. Google Pixel 10 camera specs. Swipe to scroll horizontally. Camera, Pixel 10, Pixel 10 Pro, Pixel 10 Pro XL. Rear camera 1, 48 megapixels 1/2 inch wide, f1.70, 82-degree FOV. Quad PDAF. 50 megapixels 1/1.3 inch wide, f1.68, 82-degree FOV. Quad PDAF. 50 megapixels 1/1.3 inch wide, f1.68, 82-degree FOV. Quad PDAF. Rear camera 2. 13 megapixels 1/3.1 inch ultra wide, f2.2, 120-degree FOV. Quad PDAF. 48 megapixels 1/2.55 inch ultra wide, f1.7, 123-degree FOV. Quad PDAF. 48 megapixels 1/2.55 inch ultra wide, f1.7, 123-degree FOV. Quad PDAF. Rear camera 3. 10.8 megapixels 1/3.2 inch telephoto, f3.1, 23-degree FOV. 5x optical, dual PDAF. 48 megapixels 1/2.55 inch telephoto, f2.8, 22-degree FOV. 5x optical, dual PDAF. 48 megapixels 1/2.55 inch telephoto, f2.8, 22-degree FOV. 5x optical, dual PDAF. Front camera, 10.5 megapixels wide, f2.2, 95-degree FOV. Dual PDAF. 42 megapixels, f2.2, 103-degree FOV. Dual PDAF. 42 megapixels, f2.2, 103-degree FOV. Dual PDAF. Google Pixel 10 Pro and 10 Pro XL. The Google Pixel 10 Pro and Pixel 10 Pro XL share identical camera hardware, so there's no need to compromise on choosing your favorite device size. As such, the results you see here will be identical between the two models. Main camera and motion. Google Pixels had the best motion capture in the industry for a very long time, but we started to see that crown falter a bit last year. Both Honor and OnePlus have caught up to Google's motion capture fidelity and, at times, have surpassed Pixel cameras. Samsung has even put in considerable effort to address its long-standing issue with motion capture with the Galaxy S25 Ultra. For this motion test, my wife used a toy lure on our cat to get it to jump around the living room. I held two phones side by side and tapped the shutter button simultaneously. Each phone was allowed 2 shots, both of which can be viewed side by side in the photos below. This ensures they aren't cherry-picked or biased to the best of my abilities. The results were mostly unsurprising if you've followed our motion tests before. The Honor Magic 7 Pro is the clear winner and handily beats the other phones. I'd say the Pixel 10 Pro and Pixel 9 Pro are a tie. While the Pixel 10's photos are slightly brighter, I prefer the texture on the Pixel 9 Pro's photos. Get the latest news from Android Central, your trusted companion in the world of Android. The comparison between the Pixel 10 Pro and the OnePlus 13 is a little harder to judge. The Pixel 10's photos are brighter but softer than those of the OnePlus 13. The cat's fur appears clear in one shot on the OnePlus 13 and in the other shot on the Pixel 10 Pro. Maybe give the Pixel 10 Pro a very slight edge in this one. The Galaxy S25 Ultra test surprised me a lot. Typically, Pixels trounce Samsung's phones in any motion test, but that wasn't the case here. If anything, the Pixel 10 Pro is only marginally better in some parts of the photo, like the cat's face and slightly brighter shadow detail. I also took the OnePlus 13, Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, Google Pixel 9 Pro XL, and Google Pixel 10 Pro XL out for a photo shoot in and around the Biltmore house. At 1x and 2x zoom, the Pixel 10 Pro XL demonstrated a notable improvement in dynamic range compared to the Pixel 9 Pro XL. I've also found that the Pixel 10 Pro's photos have an excellent texture. Bricks, carpets, and other finely textured surfaces retain their detail much better on the Pixel 10 Pro than on the Pixel 9 Pro. The OnePlus 13 also does an exemplary job of this, while Samsung's Galaxy S25 Ultra tends to scrub away some of that fine detail. Likely because Samsung's processing algorithm thinks it's camera noise, telephoto and AI zoom. One of the highlights of the Pixel 10 Pro series is the upgraded ProRes zoom, which finally competes with other premium Android phones by giving users the ability to zoom up to 100x with the camera, since the telephoto lens on the Pixel 9 Pro and Pixel 10 Pro is the same. The enabling factor here is the new onboard diffusion model that runs completely on Tensor G5. That means, by default, any photo that's zoomed in at 30x and beyond is automatically enhanced with an onboard AI algorithm. If you've learned anything about AI over the past few years, that means that results are either mind-blowing or head-scratching. Samples below are taken between 30x and 80x. The results were completely unexpected. The Pixel 10 Pro XL only won in maybe 2 out of the 8 samples above. I say maybe because while the picture of the gargoyle statue at 80x looks better on the Pixel 10 Pro XL.
Alright, that'll do.
Yeah, on the hardware side, it's not going to be that exciting. I can tell you that much right now.
No, that's okay.
But there was a lot on this. I was pleasantly surprised.
The Android responsibility, right? Because you know that Android got the Android team rather got moved into his division.
Right.
So he's now focusing on hardware and software. He's focusing on AI. He's focusing on making the Pixel the best canvas for whatever Gemini is going to turn into. Right. The show-stopping example of what mobile AI can be. And this is the year because Google is so far ahead of Apple when it comes to built-in AI.
Apple would have to take the field first, and then they'll be.
That's it. So I think this doesn't need to be a massive hardware iteration because Google's already trouncing Apple on the software side when it comes to AI. Plus, I'm also going to, put out a hot take.